Woman in the Ocean. By Joseph Logsdon. Mark gazed into the water, finally content with himself, his surroundings, and everything in between. There was a sense of relaxation, complete and total peacefulness, among many other feelings, ranging from happiness and satisfaction, to calmness and total serenity. The water was tranquil and silent, progressively deepening his understanding of himself, on both spiritual and human levels. He had finally accomplished his goal, with a little luck along the way, after so many years of struggling. Life had finally become something that he could enjoy, as opposed to what it had been in the past, miserable and soul-crushing. Mark sipped his glass of wine, much closer to drunkenness than he dared to admit. He had emptied bottle after bottle, with the hope that eventually, there would be no need for any unpleasant thoughts. The waves crashed against the boat, their strength unrivaled by any other surrounding force. He was in a state of true bliss, incomparable to just about anything he had experienced before, that including the birth of his own children. As far as he was concerned, the world belonged to him, and no one else had the ability, let alone the courage, to put a stop to his endless happiness. Early in the morning, just before dawn, Mark started to experience the most pleasurable moment of his life. He rose out of his chair, raised his glass in the air, and from the top of his lungs, screamed into the sky, more self-aware than he had ever been before. He was finally alone, in the middle of the ocean, for once perfectly free to actually experience life to the fullest. There was no longer a need to hide from life, something he had done in the past, to very negative results. Out in the distance, just barely visible, a presence slowly made its way in the direction of the boat. At first, Mark, distracted by his inability to perceive sadness, didn't even notice the mysterious danger in front of him. Reality had disappeared, vanished without a trace, in the end leaving nothing behind. He was oblivious to the world, undeniably delusional in the way that he glared at the sky, clenched his teeth, and sharpened his breath. The world he had known in the past, a corrupt world no doubt, finally no longer had any influence over him. All at once, reality entered his mind, stripped him of innocence, perhaps in order to finally make him aware of something unseen. There was a voice, a soft voice, potentially belonging to that of a female. The voice was calm, impossible to resist, its rhythm slowly conquering every aspect of his soul. Mark walked towards the edge of the boat, in danger of falling into the water, especially given that he was heavily intoxicated enough to make the biggest mistake of his life. That soothing voice, wherever it came from, brought him a great amount of peace. He didn't care where it had originated, what it wanted, or even what it had to offer, just as long as the singing continued. The singing became progressively louder, slowly moving closer to him, from seemingly every direction and viewpoint. He was caught in a trap, wedged between what he knew, what was reality, and what remained clear fantasy. Mark finally opened his eyes, only barely aware of his surroundings. He finally heard something quite strange, almost what seemed to be the splashing of water. Mark finally looked down, twice as drunk as he originally thought. There was a woman in the water. She was naked, her breasts clean and firm, very enticing to his eyes, to the eyes of any man. She gazed up at him, large amounts of laughter within her voice. "I must be dreaming," Mark stated, taking another sip from his glass. "Dreams aren't real, whereas I'm very real," she chuckled, swimming towards the boat. "I'd like to think that. Believe me, I would, if not for the fact that we're in the middle of the ocean, literally hundreds of miles from civilization. Now, you tell me, which story sounds more believable, mine or yours?" "You're drunk, in no condition to argue, so forgive me if I don't answer that question. This boat that you have, it's very pretty. How did you manage to get it, just out of curiosity? What's it to you?" "Oh, no reason, I was just being nosy. You see people all the time, they come into your life, And just like that, sometimes for no reason at all, they disappear again. Are you one of those people? What makes you ask that? You don't like to answer questions, I take it because you feel threatened by them. You keep everything locked inside, deep within your heart, for the slightest chance that you might escape from a dull life. You don't know what it means to be truly human. Your life, I'd say, will go on forever, your consent meaningless, worth little more than an old piece of paper. That drink in your hand. That's right, you know the one, that glass you keep beside your bed, it needs to be destroyed, she stated. How do you know anything about my life? The fact that you know so much about me, my drinking for example, proves that this is a dream, he panted. Well, assuming this is a dream, you have nothing to lose, and since you have nothing to lose, why don't you invite me up? There was absolute silence in the air. Mark briefly turned his head away, tempted by her seductive offer. Her beauty was stunning, near perfection, in many ways completely untouchable. He was just drunk enough, it appeared, to give her a chance. You can come up, but only on one condition. You have to tell me your name, he stated. Tiffany, she answered. Well, Tiffany, welcome aboard, Mark cheered, raising the glass in his hand. She slowly attached herself to the side of the boat, not the slightest sign of resistance in her arms. She gently crawled to the top, precise in her movements, almost like she had done it before. Mark grabbed her arms, the strength in his hands being used with full force, his mental strength just shortly behind it. He looked into her eyes, suddenly overwhelmed with a great amount of lust. Her lips touched his mouth, immediately and very deliberately, many aspects of her irresistible, unworldly in fact. Has anyone ever told you, I'm sure they have, that you're very hard to resist? I've been told a lot of times, many more than I care to admit, she sighed, her wet feet landing on the floor. You don't like being looked at, I take it? I've been looked at here, there, every which way imaginable. It starts to get annoying, when seemingly every man, young and old, fat and skinny, muscular even, seems to think that because I'm a woman, attractive in some regards, they can take advantage of me, treat me like trash, a whore, some slut with no future, as valuable as some piece of paper, less sometimes, more like a piece of meat. My main purpose, the only one, to please as many men as possible, she huffed. I didn't mean to insult you, that is, if that's what you're trying to say. Well, actually, I never said anything like that, nothing of the sort, other than probably what you're reading into it. You've been very kind, let me tell you that, because without you, I'd still be in that water, cold and wet, she stated. Well, you'll be happy to know, that below the deck, there is a kitchen, a place for you to rest, and even a bathroom. It's quite strange, you have to understand, that I should meet a woman, a beautiful woman, out among the water, some place where there should be no one. Why do you think that is? I'll tell you everything, just as soon as I possibly can. But first, I really would like to get dry, she begged. Mark paused for a moment, under the spell of her charm. He stared into her eyes, deeper than he should have, considering how she gazed back at him, her lips red, just begging to be kissed. He hated himself, for reasons that seemed ridiculous, but actually, were very much real. She wouldn't let him go, and she wouldn't let him breathe, think, or resist, she wouldn't let him question, rationalize, or do anything that would prevent her from getting what she wanted. All of his judgment, his ability to think, had been taken from him. The bedroom appeared to be very large, big enough for an entire group of people. The bed was soft, comfortable, a perfect match for everything that he needed. It was where he slept, sought peace for himself, the entirety of his soul within reach. Tiffany gently touched his shoulder, sensually grabbed his arms, all at once overpowering his ability to resist her. Now, just as a formality, We really must find you something to wear, should we not? I actually like myself naked, prefer it in fact, and I'm not going to apologize for it. I see the way you look at me, somewhat like you can't even breathe, those eyes of yours completely defenseless. You want me. Don't bother trying to deny your feelings. You seem to be under the impression, you of course won't admit it, that this is some kind of dream. This is very real, much more realistic than you'd think, all things taken into account. Let me take care of you, for once give you what you really need, a good fuck, she uttered. Mark stared at her wet, naked breasts, confronted with a very difficult choice, for the most part unable to express himself. His heart started to beat faster and faster, at almost precisely the point when everything, his morality included, suddenly came crashing down. He was, all at the same time, intoxicated, overwhelmed, blinded by her sensuality. I'm a married man, you should know. I have a family, friends, a life that most people would give anything to have, he stated. And yet, all of those things, your wife, those kids that you profess to love so much, don't really amount to anything. Be honest with yourself, if they did matter, would you really be on this boat? They're only there to make you weak, just as common as the next man, more common actually, just so they can satisfy their need to control everything and everyone. I can liberate you. I'm sure eventually give you what all men want. I'm right here, all of me, my body only inches away from you, she breathed, kissing his cheek. Mark finally lost control of himself. Their lips met, fiery passion burning inside them. His trousers, once representative of what little pride he had, suddenly fell against the floor. She lowered herself against the bed, swiftly pulling him down in the process. Mark could feel himself inside her, relief finally entering his mind, in perfect accordance with the pleasure that was induced with every thrust. He could feel himself sinking deeper and deeper into lust, the point of no return finally out of sight. Time slowly progressed, seconds becoming minutes, minutes becoming hours, an entire lifetime encompassed within their shared passion. Darkness finally entered his mind, covered his heart, rational thought no longer within the equation. His mind, just about everything that kept him going, crumbled into pieces. His eyes opened, grossly unaccustomed to the morning air, various sounds all around him. He could hear the water crash against the boat, wave after wave mixed with a forceful vengeance. He could hear everything the ocean had to offer, that God, in his infinite wisdom, had to offer. Something had happened to him, between being awake and being asleep, when everything usually appeared to be quite tranquil. Mark looked up into the sky, only somewhat coherent, by and large almost completely incapable of moving. No amount of breathing, however hard he tried, could help him rise from the floor. Far from the bedroom, he found himself on the deck of the boat, his feet bound, attached tightly to the anchor. Mark sighed heavily, taken completely by surprise, not nearly as hopeful as he had been. Tiffany stood above him, what seemed like laughter in her voice, intense pleasure in her eyes, utter and total shamelessness on her face. What's happening? Well, you've been suckered, it seems pretty much like, she chuckled. I don't understand, he cried. You must be really dumb, I can tell you that right now, to actually think I could care anything about you. I spotted your boat, I don't know, several miles back, I think it was, a little guesswork obviously going into it. I knew that, well you can guess, surely just by looking at how drunk you were, why I might see you as an easy target, she chuckled. I've always been an easy target, simply too nice to be good enough for anyone, he cried. To think that you would fall for something so childish, it really is beyond me. You could have hid the world, worshipped by thousands, millions perhaps, by which you could have created a new world, better than the one we have now. Instead, what did you do? Spend everything on filth? I'm going to take this boat, your money, everything that you have, and I'm going to do what you should have done, spend it on things that actually matter," she hissed. "The things that you think matter, I don't think matter at all. I'm a simple man, hence I have simple taste in food, music, just about everything. I don't need fancy things to make me happy. I was so lonely, then suddenly, you were swimming in the water, and I guess at that point, I thought that you could have been an escape, separate from day-to-day life. Take the money, take it all, as much as you can get your hands on. I thought this was a way for me to escape life, by trying to remove myself from the world, not even just the world, but also everyone in it. I feel trapped within my body. This feeling that comes from years of self-doubt, self-loathing probably more than anything else," he gasped. Tiffany grabbed his ankles, lifted his feet, gradually moving him closer to the edge of the boat. Her strength seemed immense, on the same level as the strongest men of the world, 3 times the strength of the average woman. Mark was helpless, stuck between what he had earned, the life he wanted, and yes, the life he deserved. There had been an acceptance within his heart, at the precise point when he realized what terrible human being he had become, in so many different ways, far from limited to just one aspect of life. She had come, similar to a thief in the night, a very narrow system of intentions on her mind, to be implemented by her alone. "You seem awfully quiet," she hissed. "What would you prefer me to be? A song and dance man? I just keep wondering what it's like to die. About all the people that did it before me. Who will do it after me, for as long as death continues to exist? I let you into my boat, treated you like a friend, more than a friend, in large part because I wanted to take a risk. I saw you standing there, completely naked before my eyes, mine for the taking. You looked stunning, at times too stunning for your own good. You had all the right stuff, that not including dignity," he sighed. "Let me tell you something about me. I don't need dignity, I don't need virtue, I don't need anything other than, well, let's say, a place to drink and fuck, late into the night perhaps, during the time when everyone else has gone to bed. You underestimated me, my ability to seduce you, and here we are, miles from a land, nowhere near civilization. You look at me like that, so very hateful, I guess similar to how most dead men look. I need freedom, true and everlasting freedom, nothing like the stuff they advertise in the media. You can give me that, right here, right now, with your death," she hissed. Tiffany tossed the anchor into the air, fury all over her face, remorse nowhere to be found. The splash was loud, its ability to penetrate their ears almost uncanny. Mark felt himself slipping, at that moment just inches away from the edge. He tried to grab something, anything that would help him keep his balance, if only even for a moment. His attempts, all of them, it should go without saying, were unsuccessful. He clung to the edge of the boat, perfectly aware that nothing could save him. Mark closed his eyes. There was a ringing in his ears, rushes of anxiety that ripped away at him, to a degree on the inside, as well as the outside. He looked Tiffany in the eye, bursts of energy suddenly reaching him, many different types of anger that he had never experienced before. Mark reached for her leg, with nothing left to lose, one final act of vengeance left within him. "We won't escape this, neither you nor I," he huffed. He held her legs tightly, no amount of resistance too great for him to handle. Tiffany's screams, unheard by the god she prayed to, proved to be a complete waste of time. He felt the water hit him, pull him under the surface, no mercy to be found. He witnessed the end of her screams, pathetic moans of terror that had been suddenly silenced by the power of the water. He held his breath for as long as he could, just a hint of resistance left within him. Her legs went limp, by which point he knew she was dead. He had very little time to live, seconds at best. There was a touch of fear, momentary anxiety, just a hint of madness, plus many other feelings, none of them more powerful than silence. The end.